Good evening, everybody. I'm Kevin Kimble, the DC Bureau Chief for National SCLC. I want to thank you all for signing on to this webinar Zoom, talking about advocacy and what the update from what we've been doing all year long with SCLC and the fight for justice. I'm glad to have Dr. Steele on and Charles Brooks, General Counsel, and our good friend Darren Watts, who is a healthcare expert we've been working with through SCLC on some equities issues. So Brady Buckner is gonna start the slideshow. Brady? You may want to turn your camera off, sir. Okay, so today's, the title for our panel is The Fight for Justice, the Need for Persistence and Diligence and Advocacy. So over the last 5 or 6 years, we've been pushing really hard. Dr. Steele has empowered us to work incredibly hard in pushing the narratives and the issues for African Americans. We've lost a lot of battles over the last 5 years. Someone said that we've lost 50 years, but really we've lost about 100 years in terms of our access and our rights. One of the things that we've come to realize is, Black people in general, present company included in some cases, are not advocating for themselves the way they should. We are not as focused and as diligent about the issues. I mean, we take the losses and we complain, but we are not, from every level of leadership, not pushing forward in an aggressive and sometimes even obnoxious manner. Many of you are veterans of civil rights. I don't have to tell you how obnoxious you had to be going back, to the 30s, 40s, and 50s and through the 60s to get your voices heard. But we've kind of lost that edge. And so the gains that we had, which should have catapulted us forward, have been lost. Right? So like we lost voting rights. So we fought really hard to get rights to vote, but then the people who got elected didn't continue that fight, and we lost a lot of rights, lost all of our voting rights, right? So much so that they're eliminating our congressional districts and other state legislative districts. So one of the things that we've talked about, Dr. Steele's I'm going to let him jump on because I know he's got to go, but I want him to talk about one of the things we've been working on is everyone talks about reparations. Well, quite frankly, we have with our disposal a lot of money, right? I mean, the government's spending trillions of dollars. Some of it has been earmarked for Black people, but we have not been able to take advantage of it or push forward. And one of those places is in government contracting. So Dr. Steele's been fighting in Cleveland because Sherwin-Williams is building a new plant, and it's $1 billion plant with about $400 million worth of government money, but no Black contractors, even though Cleveland's 56% Black. To us, that is a reparations issue and a fairness issue, and is one of those places where you can't let this go unnoticed. So Dr. Steele, if you're able to hear and speak, why don't you talk to us about Cleveland real quick?
Well, thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you for working so close and committedly on these pregnancy of Black folks being informed and understanding what the system is all about. I was in Cleveland just yesterday and want to say thank you to none other than Reverend Jesse Jackson. He was there supporting us. We have Ambassador Young supporting us. We have Martin Luther King III supporting us. We have Reverend Al Sharpton on record as well, supporting us. And we are just elated over the fact that yesterday I flew into Cleveland and Reverend Jackson came in the night before to let people know he's supporting SCLC, and he's supporting us through Dr. Cabinets, the local chapter president. Dr. Cabinets is 94 years of age, and this man has the energy of a 24-year-old, a 19-year-old. He has not given in. Dr. Cabinets called the national office in on this very serious issue. But what we are disturbed over, Sherwin Williams refused to meet with us. I never had any international corporation, state corporation, or local not to sit down with SCLC leadership and meet with us. The leadership of SCLC has been very successful in terms of corporate roundtables, the collaboration and corroboration of corporate America working with us. I just got in from Los Angeles with none other than a good friend, Tavis Smiley, and Reverend Smart, our local chapter president. Very successful. We just worked through a process of the Los Angeles City Council that was trying to eliminate the collaboration of SCLC in doing the right thing. But we were successful, and the Attorney General worked with us to move forward in that situation. So they wanted me to come to LA. And for 2 days, we had a great celebration. So what I'm concerned about is the lack of courage of Black mayors, Black elected officials from the city council all the way through state government and on the congressional side. We need to understand that we need people in responsible positions, and particularly elected positions, to have courage to stand up against power. So I'm gonna close with this, and you probably got a question or two. What we left out of Cleveland with on yesterday, we got good coverage from the local and state media, and it's going viral, and as well as the national media is picking it up. That Reverend Jackson said he came out of SCLC, and these other organizations like SCLC can train the employees or the certification of people dealing with the construction industry. That's where they get us. I want my reparation. I want my money in terms of what this country owes us. Many folks don't realize the state of Rhode Island had more slaves building on the East Coast than any other state in America. It was Rhode Island that had most of the slaves, and the erection of the skyscrapers and these giant buildings we see on the East Coast, including New York. So in closing, the media was very productive in telling our story, and Reverend Jackson said we can have these other organizations with SCLC training and certifying our people, but we're not going to leave the table, and we're going to have a prime, and we're going to have a partnership, joint venture, like we did in Mercedes-Benz here in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We're going to have a partnership, JV, joint venture, to make sure that African Americans get at the table and make decisions on $1 billion project, which they're saying going to cost $600 million. $300 million of that happen to be taxpayers' dollars, all of our dollars, the public, African American in particular. So to have Reverend Jackson, Martin Luther King III, former Ambassador Andrew Young, to come to the table and support us, but Reverend Jackson came in and said he support SCLC because he came out of SCLC, and Shervin Williams got to get back to the table and talk about a joint venture with the African American community. We also had the Hispanic community, Latinos. They were there at the meeting. It was a packed house. And thank God for Dr. Cavanis, our local president, for opening up his church. And we were there and we served lunch, and we had a great time. And I think the future is going to be great. It's bigger than Cleveland. We up south in Cleveland, but this is going to take on a national and an international concern in terms of the construction industry. That's where the money is. And that's the first start of reparation.
Thank you, Dr. Steele. That's I hope we can stay on, and because we may have questions later.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay on for a while. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna run it. So one of the things that the Cleveland example kind of rolls in, as Dr. Steele says, rolls into a bunch of things that we've noticed going on. And I've got Charles Brooks on. We actually wrote a paper, Brady. Can you go to the next slide? We did a special report called The Case for Inclusion. And one of the reasons why we're talking about advocacy here is every time the government tries to help African Americans, in particular, a bunch of white people get together and sue for reverse discrimination, right? So scroll to the first one is the Black farmers. So the Biden administration comes in and they put in a couple $2 billion for African American farmers to address past discrimination. Well, as soon as that happens, a group of white farmers sue and kick that out, right? Get it kicked out. The next thing that happens is the government, because of the PPP loans during COVID, no Black businesses got PPP loans. They set up a special situation or special time frame for Black businesses to apply, and then a bunch of white businesses sued to get rid of that preference. And then the government decided, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, decided there need to be more minorities on boards of corporate boards. They put up a plan for that, and then white people sued to get rid of that. Right. Two things struck us about that. One was, even if we were to get reparations, if the lawsuits are always successful, then it doesn't matter what we ask for. We have to start winning these fights. Right? We have to get to the place, and this is where we're talking about advocacy. We have to get to a place where we're, as an organization, as a community, as a people, fighting against these kinds of deals. The other thing that struck us is, where are these guys getting all this money to follow these lawsuits? Right? I mean, this is not cheap work. I mean, there is a concerted effort. Dr. Steele's down in Cleveland. If he's successful in getting minorities contracts, some white group's going to sue against that, try to undo it. Right? I mean, it's not like he's just going to win; it's going to go away. And so we have to, we have to bring pressure to bear. And I'm actually going to ask Dr. Steele to say this again, because we've talked about this, that we have to put pressure on Oprah, Bob Johnson, all these people, to put money into this fight for us, right? For everyone else, because for some reason, the other side has lots of money to spend. I mean, lots of money to spend. Brady, roll down to that school district. This is really interesting. In Loudoun County, Virginia, which is one of the more liberal parts of Virginia, it's Northern Virginia, still some conservative bastions there. They had enough money. They were able to hire a lawyer to sue against the school districts teaching racial equity, right? The judge this is 2021, the judge threw out that case. They lost that case. Then the next year, they filed another lawsuit, right? Here it is. They filed a second lawsuit that's suing for corruption. So evidently they have a bunch of money available, and they're winning the arguments. Like, we're losing argument after argument because we're not on the battlefield. The battlefield's shifting, and we are not engaging. And as an organization, and Dr. Steele knows how I feel about this, that is, no matter what we do, if we can't win voting rights, we can't win voting rights because they sue. We can't win any of these fights. And so that's where we're trying to galvanize. When I say diligence and advocacy, this is the diligence part. I mean, everyone's got to step up to the plate. We can't fall, and the battle's everywhere. And so is Charles Brooks on?
I am.
Charles, you helped us write this piece. You put some legal things in there, and we have talked about this. What do we need to think about as SCLC to move forward on this?
Two things. Number one, from my standpoint, is labor force development, which is already there. Mm-hmm. Some things we've accepted losses on were wholly unnecessary. In particular, a lot of people have programs for felons returning back into society. And so Black churches, SCLC, like-minded civic organizations have this question. The key is generally not just for that, but for kids who are coming out of foster care, a lot of other different things. Getting a job skill set that can give you money right off the bat. Mm-hmm. And particularly if somebody has a problem like that, then the training for like a CDL, commercial driver's license, is really helpful in order for them to be integrated back in. That also means poverty. So don't think of it in terms of felon, not felon, foster care, not foster care, but think of it strictly as the imperative of addressing poverty. We have a lot of jobs that are available that we're not training people for. You had a discussion with me, I think 3-4 years ago. Mm-hmm. You were like, hey, there's going to be a lack of pilots coming because of how the retirements were rolling. Well, what did we see this past June or May? Mm-hmm. A bunch of flights were canceled because of a lack of pilots. Yeah, if those kids had been trained, discrimination wasn't going to change. You wouldn't have changed a thing about discrimination, but they would have been hired because they were needed. Yeah. So sometimes in terms of taking that, you got to take the W. So let's look back at fighting back against some of our issues. Mm-hmm. We have thought that we could have programs that affect our community directly. And what you're seeing is lawsuits about them. And that goes back to the Birmingham firefighters case, was actually a response to a discrimination case that kept Black people from serving as firefighters. Mm-hmm. So this whole notion of reverse discrimination is not new. That case is from the 80s. Mm-hmm. So the notion is anything that benefits Black people takes away a white right. Of course, that's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. But that's the theories that you're fighting through. So what is the natural ally, or what is the natural victory you can get when there's just a flat out need, right? So when you ask for to change resources that somebody feels like they already have, it's going to create a problem. However, if we concentrate on those available resources to make things happen, then we'll go after it. So I'll be more specific further. Going back to the Croson versus Richmond case, early 80s, when they tried to set aside contracts for African Americans, the Supreme Court, and as you can see, this is an active Supreme Court we have once again on racial issues. That's not new. At the end of the 19th century, in the late 1800s, that's what the slaughterhouse cases was about. It was about not interpreting the Constitution to benefit Black people or ex-slaves at the time, but to benefit whites. So these theories of case law that any benefit to Black people will be a detriment to whites is 130 so years old, 130, 140 year old theory. So trying to give you some positive news about it and addressing your statement, what you just asked me about, is addressing those areas where the fight meets what the needs are. And even then, you might find a fight. Even then, if you find a need to, let's say, have training for people coming out of public housing, there's going to be a political backlash to it. Oh, you're giving away money, da-da-da. This country has a very long history of trying to train people, and every country in the world is successful, trains people or young people to meet the needs of the nation so that you don't have to go overseas to get the workforce labor you do, who will have to send money back home because that's a drain on the economy for that domestic country. Every country goes through it. I'm just thinking about European countries right now. So those things can be addressed. And by those things, I mean particular programs to your area where there's a deep need, putting kids involved in those kind of programs. I say kids, I just mean young people under 25, putting them in programs where they effectively can gain wealth. None of that addresses a lot of things that President Steele is addressing to you about voters' rights, which was the erosion that has been happening, that we've been talking about that for at least 7, I think 8 years. I say going on 10 years now, because I think I became general counsel in November 2013. So we're going on nearly a decade, and we began to see those erosions of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The question is, how do we address both voting, political power, I'm putting that in one basket, economic power, job opportunities, I'm putting that in the second basket. You got to go at them head on, but the notion that you can sue your way out of it or get legislation when there's a division based upon race, these suits are happening over and over again, even when they don't make sense on their face.
Right.
Like the notion that teaching history is a negative to the kid hearing it, and he has a freedom not to hear the truth. You know, that sounds almost Orwellian, but that's where we are right now. That the truth is a damage to you. Listen to the lie that I have to say it. So part of that is we have to know our history. And by that, I mean all of the history, not just a lot of times we focus on our civil rights history in the modern civil rights era. We also need to pick up the original civil rights era, which was the anti-lynching movement. So that stuff really, for me, post-Reconstruction, we've got to understand the patterns. Why those patterns are important? Because they repeat themselves over and over again, right? The notion of how we collaborate with groups is very important. But Frederick Douglass tried to work with Susan B. Anthony, and she had some pretty racist things to say. I say that by example to mean we have to align ourselves with people who actually have our best interests, not just wanting to usurp our goal line. And sometimes they look the same in terms of intertwined issues and intertwined goals, and they're really not the same. And some of those same mistakes are being made over and over and over again. And oh, by the way, just from a historical standpoint, once Frederick Douglass knew what Susan B. Anthony had to say in her speech, he dissolved the organization working with her, and women wouldn't get the right to vote. We were one of the last Western countries for women to get the right to vote. It didn't happen until 1920. Yeah. So other countries in Europe were getting it in the late 1800s. But I directly tie that to the racist rhetoric of Susan B. Anthony and her group and her movement, which was we should have rights before Black men. So I'm saying, I know I'm covering a lot. I'm covering it quickly.
But Charles, can I say something about what you're saying about Susan B. Anthony?
Yes, sir.
Then you had Black organizations who was out here respecting her and having Susan B. Anthony Day.
Correct. And they don't want to hear the history about it.
They don't want to know the history. These were civil rights, well, at least two civil rights organizations who was recognizing and honoring Susan B. Anthony, who was a racist.
Yeah.
But I didn't mean to cut you off, but I want you to know that I applaud what you just said.
Right. And there are other times, groups and histories, we've got to understand it because we're on a line with a lot of people and we want to have alignments with people who are actual our allies. An actual ally knows the real history. So there's a whole nother thing I can go into. I'm just not going to swerve into it. But in 1939, African Americans absolutely did things that put their well-being on the line in Harlem to make sure that communities who had non-conforming sexual identity issues were saved, which led to the big ballroom incident. So there are times we've worked with people, there's times that we've sacrificed for people, but what we never should be is stepped on. And that's what Susan B. Anthony tried to do with her meeting with Frederick Douglass. And you might want to, if y'all have time, just please read the speeches. A lot of times arguments are so twisted. I remember, before the Charlottesville thing, they were in the Deep South, they're trying to make the argument that the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. Right. But the states wrote
That's right. It had everything to do with slavery.
Yeah, the states wrote documents saying we're defending slavery. I mean, they put it in writing, all but two. And it was clearly about slavery from the top to bottom. So, the term is gaslighting people. And if a group who's quote unquote your ally or your enemy is trying to gaslight you, you got to understand both approaches. That's why I brought up Susan B. Anthony. She didn't approach from the standpoint of an enemy. Her father was a famous abolitionist, wanted to abolish slavery. But she wasn't allied on us being full citizens, just not being enslaved. So are you aligning yourself with a group that wants you to be a full citizen, or they just want you not to be a slave? You have to really think about who you're working with.
That's right.
Well, I want to.
Go ahead.
I got Darren Watts. I got Darren Watts here. He's a healthcare expert we've been working with on health equity issues, and this ties in. It does. Maybe all the stuff may seem disparate, but it ties into this larger scheme that the assault is on a bunch of sides. So Darren's going to talk to us about some of the stuff going on with a group called ICER and what that means for Black people. But one thing I want to say is as we go into this, that one thing I learned in this process is Black people get treated differently in healthcare in a number of ways. But I found out that Black kidney function are judged differently than white kidney function, right? So in order for a Black person to get treated for kidney disease, their kidney function has to be 30% less than that of a white person with the same illness. So there's a lot that goes into this. And so Darren, go ahead and bring us in, put us together.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for that introduction and for including us. You're absolutely right. As a people, we really need to focus more on advocating for ourselves and making sure that we don't just let things happen, because if we just let them happen, they're not designed to even contemplate us. Right. And this is a great example. We don't focus on this at all. It's kind of off the beaten path, but it has great impact on our people. And that's something in healthcare called ICER. And I know most people will ask, what's an ICER? Well, it's not something that's going to cool your drink. Okay. ICER is a group. It's an organization.
What's the acronym stand for? What's the acronym? What does it stand for?
The Institute for Clinical and Economic Review.
Gotcha.
What is ICER?
With economic being the underlying word, economic being the key word here.
That's right. What that means is that in the healthcare system, we're talking about access and affordability and trying to weigh them. ICER has been taking on a role in society where they do health technology assessments. They do what we call value assessments. So they're supposed to be even-handed, so we think, where they really figure out what should something cost, how does this benefit the society, things like that. But in reality, ICER reviews are much more skewed towards informing payers, insurance companies, insurers, and unfortunately, to a much lesser extent, clinicians and patients on the quote value of treatments out there. What's so important about them is that they do it with very limited information. Sometimes they do it even before the FDA is approving a product. They'll assess the whole thing. And the way they set it up is that their reviews are like a math problem in many ways. They set up a model to add up all the costs and benefits of treatment. Then they compare them. They'll compare them sometimes to older treatments, sometimes they'll compare them to treatments that may have been innovating and coming out around the same time. But anything that's not included in their model already isn't calculated in the value. And their models are built on tradition. So very often they'll be modeling from, clinical trials in Europe or whatever it is. Last year, I do a lot of work with a bunch of other health equity driven organizations. And last year, thank you very much to Mr. Kevin Kimble, SCLC came in on one where we were monitoring what ICER's doing, where they were monitoring or they were reviewing therapies for a disease called Myasthenia Gravis, which is a very rare disease, but it's chronic and it really is debilitating for some people. And it's a disease where there were great differences in it has a great impact on especially Black women, where there are great differences in how Black women present. For example, they got it earlier in life. Most white women that get it in the 40s or 50s, but many get it in their teens or their 20s, and it impacts their life. It impacts their muscles. It impacts them with fatigue, and it makes life much more difficult. And imagine how much more difficult it is when you're at the beginning of your career or you're trying to finish school. And they didn't account for any of these differences when they're supposed to be figuring out what are all the costs. Well, the costs would be different in terms of burden on young women of color who are at childbearing age or are just starting their career and may not even be able to go to work because they've got this debilitating disease or they have flare-ups and they can't control it. Or they didn't account for the fact that Black women, for some reason over the years, didn't react to what was the standard of care very, very, very well. It didn't help them. There were all these differences that ought to be in the calculation that they would acknowledge. Oh, I understand that there are some differences, but we need data, and this doesn't fit into our model. The translation of that was, we'll talk about it a little bit, but if they didn't put it in the calculation, it didn't matter. And the important part is that this gets, to have a lot of influence in how and potentially whether payers actually cover these treatments, or whether they put up a bunch of hurdles. Oh, you've got to fail first on the old treatment. Oh, you've got to get this and that type of prior authorization. Right. And you put that on the other health disparities, and they got a
Black woman. So a Black woman would be less likely to get that cutting edge treatment early in the process because the insurance companies would not view her comorbidities or other things as well because they didn't take that into account when they were doing the testing.
Yeah, and now the important thing now is there's a new one that's especially important to us. You know what they're doing now? They're reviewing obesity therapies, and we all know that people of color bear a disproportionate burden of this disease, and that there's lots of other chronic diseases and comorbidities that are linked to obesity. Well, science now reviews obesity as a chronic disease, but it's a relatively new concept, and payers haven't caught up on this. They still view it as a quote lifestyle choice. You can't get over this because you won't exercise enough and you won't do this. And science has now figured out that some people still need help getting over this hump, and they've got therapies that can help with this. But most people who need an anti-obesity medication can't afford it because of the out-of-pocket costs. Yeah. And our concern is that if ICER, similarly to what's happened in the past, might tip their hat to health disparities and the people of color, but don't count the real lived experiences of people of color in their valuation of what is the cost of this, or what's the cost of not giving it to them. Yeah. Or what the impact is of helping people get over this chronic condition, the benefits.
Right.
It's going to be skewed again, and many people from our population will be out of this and won't be able to get this. So that's our big concern. And what we're trying to do is get as many groups, equity-focused groups, to weigh in and help ICER understand that they need to include all of the costs of obesity, including lost productivity, reduced quality of life, and the benefits of the treatment into their model. Because if it's not in the model, it don't count. All I can do is thank you all for SCLC getting involved last year, and I hope you all can help and exert the same leadership this year and help get some other groups to come in and weigh in and really let these guys know. We're thinking about actually seeing if we can't get some members of Congress to watch too and let them know, they're not going to be able to have the role that they ultimately want in this healthcare system, as an arbiter of good value, if we think that they don't count people of color right.
No, Darren, I want to thank you for giving that speech. And the reason why, I know it sounds disjointed, this whole conversation, but for everyone listening, I know most of y'all have never heard of ICER. I hadn't heard of ICER until I started working on this thing with Darren and BWHI. But this ties into the advocacy and diligence. So you have to advocate for your healthcare. You have to advocate for utility. We don't go to utility boards to fight to make sure our rates are the same or better or not worse than other communities. We don't go to the taxing commissions to make sure they aren't taxing Black communities more than they're taxing other people. We know all these things are happening. School boards, there's the white people are suing school boards over teaching race. We don't go to school board meetings or let alone sue school boards over the things that they're not doing for us. So I throw a lot at people all the time, but from the perch I have, I get to see all the disjointed and disparate treatment and disparate effort put in. And it's great to go to the beach and have a good summer, but while we're doing that, they're working. I mean, and they're winning, and that's a big deal. So Darren, if you can hang out, I want to get through the rest of the presentation before we do questions. But if you can hang out for a few minutes, there may be some questions about this that people have. So if you wouldn't mind.
Great, thank you.
No, thanks, Darren. The other, talking about disparity, I want to talk about Mason, Tennessee for a second. Brady, you pull up the Mason, Tennessee article. This thing just drives me crazy. So Dr. Steele talks about getting Mercedes-Benz to come to Mississippi or Alabama, which was a great thing. Well, this little Black enclave in Tennessee called Mason, Tennessee, some of y'all may have heard of it, some of you may not have, ended up being, it was in bad shape. It was in Tennessee. They actually had Ford Motor Company was going to put a plant in close to their town. Now, this town 30 years ago or 20 years ago was a white majority town. They kind of ran to the ground, abandoned it, and the Black people kind of took it on. Ford Motor Company is going to actually put a plant there. And the state, so because of all the tax revenues and all the development, the state tried to take away their charter. Right, this is going to take the land from them, and fortunately, this came to light, and a lot of people jumped in. I think the NAACP filed a lawsuit. It was a lot of advocacy, which is a good thing. But if you really think about, with all the reverse discrimination, everything, anytime there's any possible chance for African Americans to be uplifted, it's almost like going back to Tulsa. They just blow it all up. And I think we're fooling ourselves, or those of us who have a little bit of comfort forget how much can be taken from us at any given time. And so that is what this conversation is about, and about advocacy. One of the things, we have a couple of takeaway asks. We're at about an hour, 30 minutes. So there are a couple of takeaway asks here that we want to throw out. And one is, we've been encouraging the Congressional Black Caucus members to vote against increasing the debt ceiling unless it includes voting rights and reinstallment of the 1964 1964 Civil Rights Act, because they were able to, they suspended the rules, the filibuster rules in the Senate to pass a debt ceiling bill with only Democratic votes. There were no Republican votes. So they suspended it so Democrats could pass it, including members of the Black Caucus. If we had held our votes, if we could get to Dr. Still's point, the courage to hold back our votes until they give us some things we want, then we can move forward. And I think that is, so anytime you're in conversations, you guys are leaders in the community, you're leaders nationally, that's something that we should be demanding, that there's no value in our members of the minority members of Congress voting for the debt ceiling. We don't get any of the money, as you can see from none of the infrastructure money that gets spent, none of the PPP money. States are still holding on to about $100 billion of COVID money instead of giving it to minority communities. So we're very much into being more aggressive. And Dr. Still, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Weigh in. You know, I've talked about this. I'm pushing the membership to be aggressive, but I want them to hear from you that you and I have had this conversation that it sounds crazy or maybe aggressive, but that's the kind of move that we need to make.
I agree with you 1,000%. First of all, you mentioned something that you and I have been talking about, Kevin, and that's the lack of courage. Mm-hmm. You need to step down from being a so-called leader. But let me just say this from the beginning. Politics has never freed the oppressed. Mm-hmm. The oppressed must free politics. Mm-hmm. And our people don't understand that you have to have courage to stand up for what is right. And you and I agree, Kevin, that you don't get caught up in standing up for what is legal, because many times what's supposed to be legal in terms of the African-American community is really something that's against us. Mm-hmm. And the legal system is what it says. It's legal. It's not justice. Mm-hmm. It's no justice. It's just us being used and manipulated through the legal system. That's how we became slaves, through the legal system. Jim Crow was legal because the federal government allowed it to be legal. Let me tell you about white supremacy. And this would take in what all you're doing. I think in the history of the year 1890, 1891 in the state of Mississippi. Yeah. This is how Jim Crow came to fruition. They had a constitutional convention in the state of Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And they had one Negro to attend that convention, the Constitution Convention in Mississippi. And I told folks, I didn't know Clarence Thomas was living back then, but it was around 1890, 1891 when they had a Constitution Convention to declare. And it was never ratified by the people of the state. It was just in the Constitutional Convention with that one Negro who voted that it was legal for white folks to be considered superior over Negroes, Black folks, African Americans. That was the law, and what out of the state of Mississippi, it was never ratified. You know why? Because the majority of the population was Black folks at that time. They were Black, they were Negroes. And they never brought it to a vote to be ratified. White folks did what they just wanted to do. And that's how Jim Crow came to fruition, out of that particular Mississippi Constitutional Convention to change the law that Black folks had no rights to any degree, and we were inferior to white folks. So what are you saying? I'm saying we are reliving that, Kevin, and to the rest of the panelists and to the people on this conference. We are reliving that today in terms of white people saying they are superior to us. Up south in Cleveland, Ohio, that's what's happening. You got the Black mayor who's a leader of the city council in the city of Cleveland, and you got 9 Black city council persons out of 17 on the city council. Mm. Yeah. And of course, you got the Black caucus from the legislature. None of those entities are supporting our fight in terms of Sherman Williams, who's been around for 155 years. Now, this is what I told them in Cleveland yesterday. I was listening to a jazz station, and I wanted to go to a gospel station. So I'm just turning the knob. But before I got to the gospel station, I had to go through a blues station. And I heard Lil Milton or B.B. King, one of them saying, if you love me like you say, baby, why you treat me like you do? Sherwin Williams, you saying that you're here for the citizens of Cleveland, Ohio, and the state of Ohio. You've been in business for 155 years. If you love me like you say you love all of the citizens, taxpaying citizens, using half of the money from taxpayers. Then why you don't have a Black Prime construction company in partnership with the 9? So not only in the construction business, you're going to Congress. You're talking about people in Congress who are not speaking up like they should and taking the courageousness of standing up to racism in America. It has been proven by the CDC that racism is a virus, and it's contagious, and it's in the DNA. So when people of the Caucasian race tell you, well, I wasn't back there then when they had slavery. I wasn't back there then when they lynched Negroes. Thousands of Negroes were lynched, just the ones we know about, not the ones that still missing. And they still lynching in more than one way. Some of them are still being lynched in Mississippi. They're still doing it. And if they don't lynch you from a tree or a rope, they'll lynch you by not giving you the money on reparation or giving you the loans at the bank. We spent $72 billion in the last 2 or 3 years in terms of African Americans, in terms of hotels, motels, and flying all over the world, and never advocating for this country to invest in our communities and small businesses. I'm gonna say this on close out. I used to see as a young boy and then as an adult, all of these foreigners come here to America, and before you know it, within a few months into a year or two, they own their own businesses. And I used to ask my mom and dad and grandmama, how did they come here to start their own businesses? And we never thought, because we thought America would be better than that. America put them in business. They put everybody in business like with the Ukrainians. And I love the Ukrainians. We had an office in Ukraine. But the point being, all of the money, trillions of dollars, being spent abroad. That's why Dr. King said, and I'm going to close out. He called his mama 2-3 days before he was assassinated. Miss Alberta King, as you know, she was assassinated too. He called Miss Alberta King his mother. He said, Mama, my next sermon on Sunday is going to be America just might go to hell. That was Dr. King. Now, the reason he said that, he said it because of the Poor People campaign. And he was talking about the fact that America has all of these resources. He believed that every citizen in America should be guaranteed a paycheck. Yeah. And he said, with all the resources America has, it doesn't try to help poor people, in particular African American, Black folks, Negroes at that time. Yeah. He said, America just might go to hell. That was going to be his sermon. And ladies and gentlemen, I would never get it off my mind how we as a people must demand reparation. I want my money. They got to pay us. We built this country, and they won't even give you a business loan at the bank.
Yep. No, that's so I brought you in because some of the stuff we say is it's definitely aggressive, and I want the chapters to know, because this is really upon SCLC. Dr. King got all the stuff. As much as we talk about the other groups, they're all great, but this iteration of civil rights, and I'll let Brooks speak to this. So this iteration of civil rights was spearheaded by SCLC, right? And like I said, there was a bunch of splinters from Reverend Jackson, others who splintered off from SCLC.
And as you know, Cleveland, he was in Cleveland. Reverend Jackson was in LA with me a few weeks ago. We've traveled the country together, and he tells them, I'm with the leadership of Steel and SCLC. I came out of SCLC and I endorse it. Ambassador Andrew Young is on our side. He came out of SCLC. Martin Luther King III, a good friend of SCLC and mine personally. You know, he was president for 5 years of SCLC. He endorsed what we're doing economically. And matter of fact, let me just say in my summation of what I think is happening, our leaders today who are in politics and some who are not in politics and consider themselves leaders, they have been co-opted. Us forward no more. They don't care about the masses of people. And somebody got to stand up and tell the truth.
No, I think that's, I mean, and that's what this is, again, when you look at the battlefield, the people on the other side never stop. I mean, they may lose a couple of battles, but they're relentless in taking us backwards as far as they can. And we are not, and we are accepting it. I mean, it's the thing that drives me the craziest, that they'll put out a report that came out 6 months ago, said, Black people have made tremendous gains over the last 100 years. It was, I think, Wells Fargo and Johns Hopkins University. I wanted to write a report, but we can't raise the money to write a report. Someone paid them. Wells Fargo paid a lot of money to write a report saying how great things are for Black people. And we're like, if you go back to 1921, the height of Jim Crow, things were probably better now than they were then, but they're quickly getting back to that place. And I think we are not, this is about, as an organization, as a group, calling people to task. Going to the dinner parties are great, but the people who are hosting the dinner parties need to make sure that we're fighting, or else we will be back. I mean, just like they took away the right for pro-choice, whatever, and they take away the Voting Rights Act, and they will take away as much as they can take away.
The reason they were successful at the U.S. Supreme Court in terms of Roe v. Wade, because we didn't say nothing when they took away the 1965 Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, or the 64 Civil Rights Act.
We went back to state rights. When I was growing up, my mom and dad and grandmama told me that the state government was the enemy. Dr. King said the government is the enemy. You need to know how you gonna win the fight if you don't know who you fighting. You fighting the enemy, and the enemy is the government. I think there's only about 10 minutes left. Is there any questions? Sorry, I mean, we've kind of gotten aggressive. Charles, do you have anything else to add to this? Are you still at Brooks?
I'm still here.
Anything, I know we got a little fiery. Anything else you want to throw in there in terms of how we move forward and some of the asks we might want to have?
Before Charles, come on, let me close with this. We got to stop arguing about what is legal and start fighting about what is right. And the legalization will take care of itself.
You start with what's right and you get to the legal. That's absolutely right. Brooks, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr. Brooks, go ahead.
No, I'll just do a couple of sentences wrap up. In order to approach what we want in terms of rights, beyond the protesting, of which we are very efficient at as an organization, is having targets that have an economic impact. And that's been some great work that you've done, Kevin. I'll leave it at that. So you can have a labor force when a workforce development unto itself.
And I'm seeing Mr. Mills from Roanoke Valley's on there. Thank them all the time for letting us use them as a incubator for our workforce program, which we've been able to expound on in other places, talking about getting Black kids. One thing I don't want to pontificate too much, but everyone talks about gun violence, right? They'll spend $1 million doing gun buybacks or increasing criminal penalties, putting ankle bracelets on people, sending dogs in, or whatever they'll do. But the one thing they won't do to stop gun violence is give Black kids jobs, right? They won't spend a dime helping Black kids get work. And that is the thing that, every kid we've gotten a job, Mr. Mills down in North Carolina, they're no longer a criminal risk, right? They're not going to be out on the street corner. They're working hard, making $40 an hour or whatever they're making, and they're living their lives for a very small investment. But people would rather spend $1,000 buying a gun than $1,000 on a kid getting trained. So any questions? I mean, does anyone have any comments or questions? I apologize. We went a little long. Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. Good afternoon. Good evening. Thank you for the invite to this meeting. I'm Josephine Morning. I'm the president here in Prince George's County, Maryland, which is also Washington, D.C. area. Yes. two things. The first thing I want to know is, okay, the Civil Rights Act. I was just talking to Congressman Steny Hoyer on Sunday. We need to do something because the expiration is going to occur. 95% of the people in the USA does not know that the Civil Rights Act has an expiration date on it.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, June the 10th was fine. Fine, you gave us a holiday. But if this Civil Rights Act expires, that Juneteenth not going to mean nothing to us, because if we have somebody in like Trump, he going to say, put them all on the boat and send them back to Africa. So I really feel we should be working on that. Number two, Sherwin-Williams. How do you feel we should go about dealing with Sherwin-Williams? Number three, Wells Fargo. It's funny that you brought it up because there's lawsuits, class actions against them because they're discriminating against Blacks, and we here in Prince George's County want to enjoin the lawsuit because we have some forensic cases that we can use.
Okay.
But Josephine, let me just say, you're doing an outstanding job, and we appreciate all the work that you have done and still doing. But and I don't want to take over the show, but I am because I got something to say. I'm out here every day dealing with this all over the world. So the 1965 Voter Rights Act was the catalyst of freedom for the whole world. The whole world. Now, first of all, President Biden could do something about that as well. Executive order to reestablish it. Why it was not permanent is because in order, it will have to be a constitutional amendment. That's why it's an act, 1965 Voter Rights Act. But the point being is that it had to be extended every year through Congress because you had to get a third of the states to ratify it. These folks are still looking at us as slaves. They're not going to ratify anything to make it permanent in terms of voter rights and putting Black folks at the table and make them equal with them. So what I'm saying is that when we let them get away, it was June the 25th, 2013. I ain't bashing nobody, but I'm telling you the truth. It was June the 25th, 2013, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was at the U.S. Supreme Court, not on the inside, but on the outside, with Senator Hank Sanders, his wife, and DeMark Liggins, who's our chief of staff, who worked with me every day. He was there as well. We had signs saying, don't gut Section 4 and Section 5 of the 1965 Voter Rights Act. Now, most Black folks still don't know what took place. That's when, talk about suppression of the vote, that's when you went back to state rights. That's Jim Crow. That's why you have gerrymandering and all of this in all of these states. The state is in control right now. Pre-clearance was knocked out. Before it was gutted, you would have to go through Department of Justice. And they will have to make sure that before it became any type of gerrymandering consideration or change in any district in any part of this country, that it would have to be pre-cleared. And before they pre-clear it, they would talk to the Black community. They called me many times. Do you think that they changing the district is discriminatory? Should they do it? Should they not? Keep it like it is. No, don't change nothing because that's the way we want it. You have eliminated that. The pre-clearance has been eroded. Now you're going to suppression of the votes and you're going to state rights. You're going back to Jim Crow. That's what happened June the 25th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 2013.
And Josephine, if you want, like, we should talk about Steny and keeping the fuel to the fire, because I think there's a congressional. Even if we don't win this congressionally, we should be pushing pressure on people. So yes, I'll call you. Thank you.
I agree that we should. I mean, you know what? We can't let this happen because our children and grandchildren don't know about it. Yeah. So what will happen? We're going to leave here.
Yeah.
And they're going to be the one that this results.
Yeah, they'll live with this, the end result. Yeah, there's a whole lot of nightmare scenarios that can happen. I don't even want to begin to.
But Kevin, I'm sorry I talked too long, but I got to go.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
But let me say this before I go. All you got to do is deal with the 6 principles of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which we teach all over the world. Number one, I'm just going to deal with two of the principles. This is where we fall short. Number one, Dr. King said, gather information. Get the facts. That's what we do. You get the facts. And we got people like you and others, Kevin and Charles Brooks, Attorney Charles Brooks, who really research for SCLC and others. That's why I can talk the way I'm talking. I got the facts. You can argue me that I don't have the right facts, but you can't debate me. I got the facts. So number one, gather information, which are the facts. Number two, then you educate the public on the facts. Why nobody out of Washington, D.C. or the elected position of knowing the facts? Why they didn't warn the citizenry of the African-American community and fair-minded thinking white folks? Why they didn't warn them that Section 4 and Section 5 was going to be gutted by the U.S. Supreme Court, June the 25th, 2013?
I'll tell you why. Because they don't, left of center people on the left or liberals, don't spend nearly as much time trying to win the arguments as the conservatives. Like all these lawsuits, they spend a lot more time. They don't let a single argument, the conservatives don't let a single argument go past without putting their 2 cents worth in. And we do that all the time. We ignore it. We they said that's crazy. We just move on. So that's a 90% of what it is. And that the people who give money to liberal groups, whatever, don't put money in for that effort. There's no money around to be able to argue those.
To advocate, no advocation. Now, had we been educated as a people and fair-minded thinking people of all ethnicity and background, had we been educated, they never would have gutted. Why the people in Washington, D.C., let's start there. Why the fair-minded thinking people of all background, ethnicity, not to just mention African-Americans, why they didn't let the people know what was coming down? We could have filled the streets with 50 million people.
No, they never.
We only had 50 up there with us. Had we had a great number of people who knew what was coming down, it never would have been gutted. You are a second-class citizen again. We got to do it all over again. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Steele. Don't go just yet. Josephine, any more from you, or does anyone else have a comment or question?
And the only other thing I have to say is this sagging that our young people are doing, and they think it came from jail. I think someone should Google sagging and slavery. And if we educate our people on what sagging really stood for in slavery, and that's where it began, I think we're going to get our young people to pull them pants up.
That's right.
Well, again, that's to your point.
That's right. That's it, Josephine. Very good.
We don't spend the energy and the time at educating. To Dr. Steele's point, we don't educate ourselves on a regular enough basis on anything. I mean, that's absolutely right. Anybody else? I'm sorry.
Hey, Kevin.
Yes.
Super quick, and only while Dr. Steele is still here, in case he's got to add.
Yeah, I'm still here. Here.
But as you guys are talking, a lot of big ideas, really great information. I just want to remind, because we got a lot of chapters here, just like Cavan's did in Cleveland, just like Smart just did in LA.
Right.
Call the office and let's work to get Dr. Steele on the ground. When you want
very good, DeMarc.
You want to bring attention to the issue. Bringing in the national president has weight. The media pays attention. Radio pays attention. It lets people know. It lets people see what we're doing.
Yes.
He's open to traveling. So all you guys, I don't think anybody on here doesn't know how to get in touch with the office, but when you've got something, if you think it might have something, give us a shout and let's see if we can get Dr. Steele out there to try to add attention to what you're seeing. Because as Kevin said earlier, the more you go out, the more you start seeing the connected dots anyway. And that adds more fuel to the fire that he's already saying. So I wanted to say that out loud. Thank you.
That's very good, DeMarc.
There's two people have their hands up. I can't see them, Kevin. You said there are two people who have hands up. Can you get them? Can you call them? I can't see whose hands are up.
Well, this is Reverend McCarthy. This is Reverend McCarthy, Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Detroit. First of all, I want to just say Dr. Steele made a very, very important statement about him wanting reparations. They're owed to us. They're owed to us at 1619.
That's right.
The Southern Christian Leadership Conference is now involved on behalf of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in the City Council's reparations committee, where we will have a chance to make decisions on who gets money and what monies are given to the people. Now, Dr. Steele, I just want to say to you, because I never said it to you before, this last week on July the 9th, we used your economics justice slogan and movement from the streets to the streets. Yes, we did. And we gathered 40 local and national organizations, including the son of Viola Liuzzo, Anthony Luizzo, John W. Hardy, one of Dr. Bernard Lafayette's original SNCC members, together. He's also a freedom rider, together in the masses, because we had an 18% voter turnout in our last municipal election. And you, as a visionary, I have to give it to you, sir. That's why I've been following you for 7 years. Your vision gathered 40 organizations, national and local, in a press conference that was shown and a rally that was shown Saturday and Sunday straight through, gathering the votes and reuniting and gathering people back in to utilize 532,400 Black voter majority to get back engaged into the voting process. Thank you. And I want to just thank you, sir, because I want you to know that you've been an inspiration to me for 7 years. I know I haven't been calling you like I usually do and bother you, but I've been busy. We also, Doc, you just don't know the influence that you have on Detroit. And I've been telling DeMarc that we just recently found 2 of the Children Crusaders during the 1963 march here in Alabama, in Detroit. And I spoke to DeMarc about it, and he said he's going to leave it up to you to decide what to do with that. We have 2 historical Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s when he was incarcerated and wrote his letter from the Birmingham jail right here in Detroit. And we're waiting on your decision as to what to do with them. Thank you for all the leadership that you give. Sir, you just don't know the influence that we have. And I just want you to know, we just got our lease for that building that we bought, and we just bought another lot next to us. Thank you so much.
Well, thank God for you, Reverend. And I couldn't get off this phone without letting the people know what a great job you're doing in Detroit. And we just love you for it. And I'll be there real soon. But don't forget what DeMarc said. I know you don't have me in Detroit more times I can count.
Yes,
please bring me in. Let me tell the people what we need to do. I'm ready to go. So thank you, Reverend McCarthy, for all the work that you've done. And God bless you.
And thank you, sir.
Amen.
Any more? Can y'all feel anybody else with their hand up? Brady or
Dr. Howard. Reverend Dr. Howard would like to ask a question.
Go ahead.
This is Dr. Howard in Kansas City, president of SCLC Greater Kansas City Chapter. Our director of activism and membership is on too. Kevin Woolfolk is his name. And if Dr. Steele is still on, I don't know if he can hear, but Dr. Steele, God bless you. You know the roots that the KC chapter has with National SCLC, with Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver and Reverend Nelson Fuzzy Thompson and others here in Kansas City. And I've just got a couple of things, Brother President. First of all, thank you for your leadership and your courage and your boldness on the issue of reparations and these other issues in the construction industry. I've just got a couple of things. Number one, we would love to have you in Kansas City on August the 28th of this year. I know that's late notice. I know it's in just about 6 weeks. That's as we all know, the 59-year anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech and the March on Washington. The reason why I'm so intimately acquainted with it is because I'm 59 years old and was born in May of 1963 and measured my lifespan by that I Have Dream speech. But on August 28th, there are some laws that are trying to go into place here in the state of Missouri, talking about states' rights.
Yes.
That the Secretary of State can arbitrarily remove people from voter registration rolls if they have not participated or if they have not voted in a previous election.
Right.
That also coming into play here in the state of Missouri is limitations on organizations and individuals in the numbers of people that you can register to vote by law.
Right.
And that if you're going to register more than 10 people, then you've got to register yourself with the Secretary of State. There's a whole host of voter ID stipulations that are going into play, and this is ironically on August the 28th.
Right.
Is when these. So, Brother President, if it's possible, I will call Mr. Liggins. I will call you. I will be in touch. And
I would love to come and just thank you for being so focused on the real issue. But yes, DeMarc Liggins would set it up. But continue, please.
So, and thank you. And we would love, and we'd love to have your voice. It's our 50-year chapter anniversary. August 28th is the final event this year associated with that 50-year anniversary of the chapter. And it would be an awesome thing if you come. Can I say one more thing? And this is just more of an inquiry and a question related to the ask that came forth from Chairman Kimble. And that is, what are the exact demands that we are conversating with the Congressional Black Caucus? Because we've got Congressman Emanuel Cleaver here, 5th District of Missouri, who is a high-profile leader with the Congressional Black Caucus,
and a great leader. And
he's the founder of this chapter that we're in right now.
That's right.
So I'm thinking that we can leverage some things that's going on here, and we should have further discussions. But my question is, what are the exact demands that we are asking the CBC to withhold in exchange for support for this debt ceiling? And so that was the question I had, and then I'll let that go. Thank you very much.
Everything on our plate that voting rights, the renewal of the Voting Rights Act, because they tried to eliminate the filibuster to pass the Voting Rights Act. So what they did was, this came up because when they were going to pass the debt ceiling by removing the filibuster, we said, well, that was the perfect time to include that. So what we're asking and this is a hard ask, right? We're asking all the Black Caucus members to withhold any of their votes on any of the budget stuff. So they won't vote for the budget. They won't vote for the continuing resolution. They won't vote for any funding mechanism of the government until they actually get the voting rights and the Civil Rights Act stuff done.
So can we get a statement? Can the local chapter get a statement from National SCLC or from you? Giving us we need the verbiage. We need some exact stuff. We don't want to be communicating messaging that is not coordinated and unified across the chapters that comes from the national. And
that's right.
Can we get something in writing that way?
Let me say this. You just heard it from the man that I work with on a regular basis. And thank you so much for being motivated to understand what we've been saying. You picked it up. Some people just hear it go in one ear, come out the other. You picked up what we were saying. I'm working very diligently with our good friend and advisor, our DC bureau chief. That's none other than Attorney Kevin Kimble, who just spoke, as you know. Kevin worked very close as a bureau chief to keep us abreast of all of the issues and the concerns that we should be focused on out of the Congressional Black Caucus as well as Congress itself. We will work with you, and we want to initiate it out of Kansas City, if you don't mind. And let me just say, you are one of the best congresspersons.
That's right.
I want you to know that. He and I have been friends for 40, 50 years, and he started out with SCLC and former mayor of your city. We will work with him. He's always there whenever I call him. Attorney Kimble, Kevin knows him very well. Emanuel Cleaver is one of the greatest leaders, not just in politics, but as a pastor, as a preacher, and a God-fearing man who's leading his people. So yes, we will put something in writing, get it to you. And Kevin, I would like to kick it off in Kansas City.
I think that's great. I'd love that. So okay,
So Kevin and I will work with the Mark Liggins, my chief of staff, and we will put something in writing. Give us to the, this has been a busy week for me. Give us to the first of next week. Kevin and DeMark and I will get together and we'll get it to you no later than sometime next week.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Liggins and Chairman Kimble, if I could give you a call so we could set up a meeting for early next week then so that we can kind of come together.
There you go.
With,
there you go.
Kevin Woolfolk is on, our Director of Membership, and Reverend Shania Chandler Howard, our administrator, and then we've got some other folks. And the congressman might be available for that meeting. I'll check and see.
Absolutely.
But at the minimum,
let me just let you know, he and I talk all the time.
Yeah.
Whenever I get stuck on something, and Kevin would tell me, call your friend. I call the congressman. He's always there for us. Yeah.
If I can reach out, Mr. Liggins, tomorrow, and Chairman Kimble tomorrow. Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. Thank you.
This is a priority. This is a big priority for us. So that we've been working on this for about 6 months.
This is big. I like that. This is big, and we want to initiate out of Kansas City.
I saw Mr. Mills had his hand up. Is he still there? Mr. Mills, does James Mills?
Yes, I'm James Mills from Halifax County, with the Roanoke Valley SCLC. I'm the president. And I first of all, I'd like to just thank you all for having this gathering. And I salute Dr. Steele. And I really, really want to just say to you, Dr. Steele, thank you for Kevin Kimble. He came to town and he has done so much in terms of helping us here in Halifax County and in the Roanoke Valley, especially with the Lyman's program. And he doesn't really, I don't know if Kevin really knows that he has shown Halifax County schools and how to create a program to elevate some of our young people into high-paying jobs and positions. The superintendent has adopted his model, and now he's going forward and he's shining a shining example in the state as to how to take some of the young people that we have and introduce them to high-paying jobs that some of them that they don't have to go to college for. Some of them they have to have some further training after high school. Some of them they have certifications when they leave high school. But we have come a long way in these last couple of years or so in our association with him. And I'd like to just say that we have to, I believe, walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. And that is, we have to be able to multitask because we have to be social welfare organizations as well as advocates. But we got to be fierce advocates, and we have to advocate, I do believe, really aggressively, not only with the people that we find ourselves in opposition with, but even some of the people that we help elect and get in office. We have to fight like the devil. No, I'm gonna say it. It's a real place, Dr. Steele. We got to fight like hell in order to get some of our own folks to do what is the right thing so many times. Right. But we have come a long way, and when he first met me, I was not on the Board of Education for Halifax County Schools. I am now on the Board of Education for Halifax County Schools, and I am the chairman of finance.
Oh, congratulations. Congratulations. You're the chairman of finance, then we can get some jobs and get some jobs training.
That's what you put me there for, right?
That's right. And Attorney Kilmer has always complimented you and the work that you all are doing and your leadership there in terms of economic development, getting our folks ready. You know, everybody does not need to go to a 4-year institution or be a doctor or a lawyer, but we have other opportunities that they can take care of themselves. And the whole deal is, that's why we are fighting Sherwin Williams. You know, the construction industry is where the real money is. That's where the real money is.
Yep.
That's why America keep a building up for 20, 30 years, and then they knock it down so they can make their family members and their friends rich again. That's what it's all about, the construction industry, as well as the technical industry. And we have got to get laser focused on those opportunities for our people.
I've been given the red light. I've gone over my allotted time. You guys this has been a great conversation. We got follow up, but advocacy. I mean, there's no shortage of fights to be had. I want to thank Dr. Steele again. I want to thank Charles Brooks, the General Counsel, for coming on, and all the work they've helped me with over the last year or two as we've been putting together this program and this plan. And then my good friend Darren Watts for coming on talking about healthcare, because again, it's one big circle, and unfortunately, we don't have we just got to keep shoveling until we get our way out of this hole. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Thank you.